What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we got a good one for you guys. We are going round by round, taking a look at all 12 players being drafted. We'll bounce them against the rankings and let you know which player we feel is coming in the most undervalued. With that being said, though, that does not mean we believe you should reach on these players. If so, that's directly defeating the purpose of a value, but depending on how much higher than ADP we have them ranked, taking them a little bit earlier may be the correct choice. This exercise is only going to apply to the early and middle rounds. In today's video, we're going rounds 1 through 5. Part 2 will be tackling rounds 6 through 10. As we know, in the later rounds, we're shooting for maximum upside. Already, the ADP in the early and mid rounds is pretty wonky. That only amplifies as we get later in the draft. And typically, the players aren't going off the board based on ADP either, so just try and get the guys on your team you like. Before we do get into the video, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which quarterback tied Lamar Jackson with the most rush attempts inside the 5. The correct answer was Tom Brady. As for today's stat of the day, which player led the league in fumbles? Leave your answer in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, if you have not yet checked out our website this season, it's updated. Our draft package is also live, guaranteed to help you win your league. Not only will you get the draft package, you'll have access to our rankings throughout the entire season, gain eligibility for exclusive giveaways, and be granted access to our private community. With that out of the way, though, we're hopping right into the first round, and understandably, this round is pretty difficult to extract value. No matter how bad the ADPs are on different platforms, you usually don't have a good player ranked too low. Even though people's fantasy football takes vary throughout the community, when it comes to the top 12 players, they're not fluctuating by all that much. If there is a player to actually fall, it's typically one that comes with more risk or less upside. But if we assume none of the players in the first round fall, there are 3 running backs that are being drafted, one spot behind where we have them ranked. Those 3 players: Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara. No, it's not because we have these players ranked ahead of some of the other running backs. It's more of a downgrade to the wide receiver position. Michael Thomas, we bumped down a couple spots. Devontae Adams fell behind Joe Mixon, bumping him up. Really, that's just a testament to our draft strategy heading into this season, trying to secure the workload of a high-end running back. But if you ask me, I don't consider any one of those players of value. This is going to sound a little crazy, guys, but the best value player in the first round is Christian McCaffrey, first overall. Before you click out of the video, hear me out. I think I can get you guys to agree with me. I already know 1 out of 12 people watching this video agree with me because 1 out of 12 people had C-Mac last season, so they know exactly what he was putting up each week, which was monstrous type of numbers. Let's compare him to the wide receiver 1 last season, Michael Thomas, also breaking records. Would it surprise you if I told you that the gap in points between Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey was over 110 fantasy points? That's nearly 7 fantasy points per game, and these players are being drafted just 3 spots apart. Okay, we know wide receivers typically score less, so what about comparing him to the RB2? The second best running back for fantasy last season was Aaron Jones, as we know, really lucky in the touchdown department. In 2019, Aaron Jones compiled 290.3 fantasy points, scoring 5 points ahead of the third best running back, Derrick Henry. So where did Christian McCaffrey rank in comparison to these 2 players? Once again, well over 100 fantasy points. Michael Thomas actually outscored Aaron Jones last season. Christian McCaffrey put up 413.2 points, 25.6 fantasy points per game, compared to Aaron Jones' 18.1. We all know Lamar Jackson is considered a league-winning type of quarterback. Well, what if I were to tell you that Christian McCaffrey finished with just 2 less fantasy points on the entire season? No, not 2 fantasy points per game, just 2 fantasy points, 413 versus 415. While typically you could auto-draft in the first round, take all the players based off ADP, and it probably wouldn't be the reason you lose. If you're lucky enough to get the first overall draft pick and you don't take Christian McCaffrey, you probably deserve to lose your league. Let's hop over to the second round. The second round kicks off with Nick Chubb. We round it out with Allen Robinson. And unlike the first round, there are many players that we have ranked higher than ADP that are being drafted in this round. Things do get a little bit tricky here though, because we do have to factor in scarcity of position. Obviously, running backs are heavier weighted when it comes to their overall value just due to the scarcity of them, but that goes even double for tight ends if you want to secure one of George Kittle or or Travis Kelce, these guys aren't falling to the third round. So does that make them the best value? Or who knows, maybe some of you are also thinking because it's so RB heavy in the first 2 rounds, that solid wide receivers like Allen Robinson being drafted virtually as a third round pick, that seems like a massive value. You know we're super high on him this year. Unfortunately for him though, he is not going to be coming in at the best value. Sticking to our guns though, we are going to narrow it down to 2 running backs, and those 2 running backs are Kenyan Drake and Miles Sanders, 2 players we've been very vocal about liking throughout this offseason. Both are going to lead their backfield in touches. They're on offenses projected to run some of the most amount of plays in the entire league. They also have significantly more weapons than they had a season ago, and let's be frank, we wouldn't be disappointed if they repeated the same level of production they posted last season. Once both of these players really picked it up towards the second half of the season, they were already RB1s. Right now, Kenyan Drake's ADP is the 16th player off the board. Miles Sanders is coming off the board at 18. If you get either of those players anywhere near where they're being drafted, you're going to get a good pick out of them. But despite Kenyan Drake's ADP being higher than that of Miles Sanders, we still have Miles Sanders ranked ahead of him. The upside for each player is very similar. Kenyan Drake does come with a bit more risk factors. We haven't seen him carry a full workload yet. That's not to say that he can't do it. While many people are also expecting Kyler Murray to take a step forward this season, it's not a guarantee. They did bring in DeAndre Hopkins, which is almost guaranteed to improve the efficiency of this offense. But first-year wide receivers do have a tendency to struggle on new teams, and do we even know if their coach is good? I know everybody is super high on Cliff Kingsbury. He did come in with claims of an air raid offense, this no-huddle system, which was going to have a high amount of plays ran. Well, they ranked 22nd in the league in plays ran last season. If a coach is coming in and not getting it done in the one area he set out to do, that's not really a good sign. I get that Kyler Murray probably as a rookie didn't always feel comfortable calling the right audibles or changing the play at the line of scrimmage, but if you also think back just 1 year ago to the actual signing, it's almost like the Cardinals were trying to buy into their own discount version of Sean McVay, a division rival who in his first year in the league took a team that was historically 8-8, turned it into a potential Super Bowl contender. The signing initially just made no other sense than that. This was a coach who had a record of 35-40, and shouldn't the biggest red flag be the fact that he had Patrick Mahomes for his entire college career? Mahomes broke single game passing records, but in 2 years as a starter was able to win a Super Bowl. Dude's the greatest quarterback we have ever seen, rated 99 on Madden, and in 3 years at Texas Tech was not able to have a winning record. To be fair, you don't need wins in order to put up fantasy points, but when you have that level of talent throwing the ball in your offense, you do have to question him a bit on not being able to go over 500. In the third round, we start out with Patrick Mahomes and we round out with Cooper Kupp. Off the top, I do see a ton of wide receiver depth, obviously a result of being RB heavy in the early rounds, so the initial instinct is that it's probably a wide receiver. I do see a few players here that do have top 5 potential upside at their position. Patrick Mahomes obviously one of them. The only problem with drafting a quarterback so high though is that they basically do have to play to that level of performance, which isn't asking much from Patrick Mahomes. He showed us his consistency in the past 2 seasons, but this is also a position that has breakouts in it every season. Lamar Jackson, he was going in the double-digit rounds last year. Rewind a season ago. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes, double-digit rounder as well. Best value in the third round, though, is easily Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We should be thankful that we may not have a preseason, because if we did, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would definitely shoot up the draft boards. He's easily the best running back on the team, and that's saying something considering Damian Williams isn't all that bad himself. Even without the preseason though, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is unlikely to remain in the third round for very long. The illusion of risk surrounding him really isn't as massive as everyone would lead on. The team invested heavy draft capital into him, which has been very predictive in leading to successful rookie running back seasons. He's on one of the best offenses in the league, which means he doesn't need to play in as many snaps in order to produce. He isn't comparable in skills to Damian Williams. He is a step above. And what more does this team need to do to convince you that they're not fans of Damian Williams? I mean, this team was basically running out LaShawn McCoy ahead of him. Then after performing so well in the playoffs, they draft a running back highly. Guys, coaching staffs aren't going to tell you everything straight up. You have to read between the lines here. If you really are all that worried about him potentially not getting the workload early, find a replacement for him in week 1 while you assess the situation. But if I'm drafting him in the third round, there is no way I'm leaving him on my bench. We're moving into the fourth round, and I'll go through the the middle rounds a bit quicker. We start off with Melvin Gordon, rounded out with Keenan Allen. In this round, there are really 3 players worth mentioning, 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver. I think you guys are starting to notice the trend here. In the early rounds, if we are given the option between a wide receiver or a running back, both of which with a similar type of upside, we're typically going with the running back. But if you drafted a wide receiver in one of the first 3 rounds, there are 2 very good values coming off the board in round 4. That's James Conner and Jonathan Taylor. Starting with Jonathan Taylor, this is another false narrative of risk. Yes, Marlon Mack was decent last season, but no, Marlon Mack's not actually all that good. We can't forget exactly how bad he looked in his rookie season. In 2017, the year before they drafted Quentin Nelson, he was a 3.8 yard per carry rusher. Quentin Nelson, as we know, is a premier guard at the position. The offensive line is exactly one of the reasons we like Jonathan Taylor so much. As for James Conner, I don't get where this narrative is coming from that Big Ben sucked prior to him leaving with an injury. The last time I really saw Big Ben play, for a stretch of games, he was on an MVP type pace. He threw for over 5,000 yards, supported 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers, and the Steelers ranked second when it came to odds of making the Super Bowl. In order to make the Super Bowl, you gotta win games, and it's no secret running backs perform better in winning games. I understand the coaching staff hasn't been fully on board with him being the lead back, but when has this team ever used a committee? And even if they do, what are they gonna take out James Conner to put in Benny Snell? No, that would never happen. You could take a shot on Anthony McLaurin, but James Conner was not all that bad while healthy. If he's gonna be healthy, he's going to look good. He's going to get a bump in efficiency, playing on a better offense with more scoring opportunities. So right now, he is definitely being undervalued. The wide receiver prospect we have is Calvin Ridley. You know, we've been super high on him all offseason. Coming into his 3rd year, the team leads the league in vacated targets. He's shown improvement in many major categories from year 1 to year 2, and the opportunity in the red zone is massive, including over 50% of the targets inside the 10. Those are all up for grabs, and Calvin Ridley, he has 17 touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. As for which of these 3 players we think comes in at the greatest value, that is going to be James Conner. We could make a case for him potentially sucking or getting injured all we want, but if you really just look at all the factors, he's going to be the guy unless he gets injured, and he's already proven to have top 5 running back upside in that role. Moving into the final round in this video is the 5th round, and if you know anything about the 5th round, the first thing that should come to mind is the massive spike in bust rate in the players being drafted in this range. Yes, we always value drafting safety in the early rounds, but no matter what you do, it seems like we can't escape busting on players being drafted here. Leading this round is Zach Ertz, and we round out the 5th round with Raheem Mostert. Already 2 players right away that I think have a significant chance of busting. Raheem Mostert, the 28-year-old breakout who's requesting a trade. Zach Ertz already seeing reduction in his production, and now the team added even more weapons. Could that lead to more scoring opportunities? Potentially, but if you think about it, Zach Ertz is probably the most notable receiving threat on this team. I could see a scenario where he does get a bit of extra attention, and rather than forcing the ball in some tough situations, which Carson Wentz can definitely do, he may just have some better receiving options. The running backs that are being drafted in this range, they're not all that great. David Montgomery, we do have listed above ADP, and he is a player that we are targeting. He's not the greatest value out of these 12 players, but we can't stress enough the importance of securing your running back role. Make sure you have enough in case of a bye or injury, but the greatest value definitely comes at the wide receiver position. This is exactly why we feel extremely comfortable drafting heavy RBs throughout the first 4 rounds, because you still have wide receivers like this on the board. You're only going to need one top wide receiver to pair with somebody like DK Metcalf or Terry McLaurin, both players that have the potential to finish as wide receiver 1s. Pretty safe to assume they finish somewhere in the range of wide receiver 2s, but these are guys that are coming off the board much later. Another notable name is AJ Green, obviously a wide receiver with massive wide receiver 1 upside. While he is coming in at a value, I can't recommend him to be drafted on many rosters. It does take a specific composition, and that composition actually has to be more wide receiver heavy. The depth at the wide receiver position does have to sustain itself without AJ Green, because if you're drafting him, you really can't expect him to play a full 16 games. If that was really in his projections, he wouldn't be being drafted this late with Joe Burrow now leading this team. An example of a roster I would be okay with drafting AJ Green with is maybe if you got the first overall pick with Christian McCaffrey, really securing that running back position, then following that up with drafting 2 wide receivers, players like Adam Thielen, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, players we know are safe and secure in their roles, and their target market shares are going to be high in their offenses. The 4th round pick would look something like Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, 2 players with guaranteed workloads, not as much upside, but if you're drafting these guys and they're healthy and on the field, you're pretty much going to lock them in your roster every week. This would give you a little bit more flexibility from drafting some of these riskier running backs in this area. Let's say you did have the option of Raheem Mostert or AJ Green, and you recognized a big tier gap from the players after that. In that situation, I could understand taking AJ Green if all those players hit their ceilings. Calvin Ridley has his breakout season. David Johnson returns to top 10 RB form based on heavy volume. Christian McCaffrey, you already know what he can do. And then if AJ Green comes back and is any semblance of his old self, I'd take a risk on that type of upside because you wouldn't really have to do all that much on the waiver wire or with trades in order to have a strong chance to win the league. Just because you draft AJ Green early doesn't mean you can't make up for some of that lack of depth in the later rounds. Players like Brandon Cooks, Darius Slayton, heck, even a guy like Marvin Jones is someone who you know what you're going to get with. To be clear though, AJ Green is not a player we're targeting, but every player does have a spot where they fall in the draft where they're actually of value, and currently AJ Green is right in that area. Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf on the other hand, these are 2 players we both have as targets, and we also have them ranked well above ADP, so there is never going to be a scenario where we're drafting AJ Green over these 2 guys. But guys, that's going to do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.